Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Ectoplasm found Deku first. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The koi pond water was murky, a stagnant green that smelled of algae and indifference. Izuku Midoriya stared at the surface, watching the ripples distort his own reflection. It was a fitting image. Wobbly. Unstable. Broken. Slowly, a piece of paper floated to the top, ink bleeding into the water like a fresh wound. Hero analysis for the future. Number 13. He didn't reach for it immediately. He just watched the fish nip at the spine of the notebook, mistaking his dreams for fish food. Idiots, Izuku whispered, his voice cracking. He wasn't sure if he was talking to the fish, his classmates, or himself. Probably the latter. 10 minutes ago, the classroom had been a cauldron of heat and noise. The teacher, a man whose apathy was his defining quirk, had tossed the stack of career aptitude forms onto the desk like he was discarding trash. He had announced, with a cruel sort of glee, that everyone wanted to be a hero. He had let the class explode into a display of quirks, floating eyes, stretching fingers, minor telekinesis, before dropping the bomb. Oh, and Midoriya wants to go to UA too. The silence had been worse than the laughter. The laughter was expected. It was a variable Izuku had calculated into his daily existence years ago. Laughter was just sound waves. Laughter dissipated. But the silence? The silence was heavy. It was the atmospheric pressure of 30 people realizing that the delusion in the corner was more pathetic than they thought. Then came the explosion. The heat of Katsuki Bakugo's palm against his desk. The smell of nitroglycerin and caramelized sugar. You think you can rub shoulders with me? You're a pebble. A quirkless, useless reject. Izuku finally reached into the pond. The water was cold, biting at his fingertips. He fished the notebook out. It was dripping wet, the pages swollen and heavy. The cover was scorched black in the shape of a handprint. It's not totally ruined, he lied to himself. He squeezed the water out, the spine creaking in protest. I can dry it. The ink is waterproof. Mostly. He started walking. The route home was an equation he solved every day. The variable was Katsuki. If Katsuki took the main road, Izuku took the alleyways. If Katsuki stayed behind to play arcade games, Izuku took the underpass. Today, Katsuki was angry, angrier than usual, so Izuku chose the path of least resistance. The back streets. The long way. As he walked, his mind, usually a chaotic storm of analysis and hero trivia, felt sluggish. The words Katsuki had whispered at the door replayed on a loop. If you want to be a hero that badly, there's a quick way to do it. Take a swan dive off the roof and pray for a quirk in the next life. Izuku stopped walking. He stood in the shadow of a vending machine, the hum of the compressor vibrating through the soles of his red sneakers. Stupid Kaken, Izuku muttered, clutching the wet notebook to his chest. If I actually did it, that would be instigation of suicide. It would ruin his record. He's not thinking strategically. He tried to force a laugh, but it came out as a dry heave. He looked at his hands. They were trembling. Why did he bother? The statistics were absolute. The percentage of quirkless heroes was 0. Not 0.1. 0. It was a statistical impossibility. He was trying to divide by 0, and the universe was giving him an error message in the form of burns and bruises. Maybe he's right, a treacherous voice whispered in his ear. The data suggests you are an outlier. A glitch. Glitches get patched out. Izuku shook his head violently, sending droplets of pond water flying from his hair. No. No, I need to figure it out. I just need a chance. He turned the corner into a narrow shortcut that cut behind the shopping district. It was a dark, claustrophobic slice of the city, lined with the backs of restaurants and old brick walls. The air smelled of grease and garbage. It was the kind of place people ignored, a blind spot in the city's vision. Izuku liked it. It felt like him. He was halfway down the alley, thumbing through the damp pages of his notebook to check the damage on his Mount Lady sketch, when the air pressure changed. It wasn't a sound. It was a shift in density. The hair on the back of his neck stood up, a primal, evolutionary warning system that had nothing to do with quirks and everything to do with being prey. "Hey kid!" The voice was wet, like sludge moving through a pipe. Izuku froze. He calculated his options. Run forward, 20 meters to the main street. Run back, 15 meters to the intersection. Scream, unreliable, the alley walls would dampen the sound. He turned slowly. Emerging from the shadows behind a dumpster was a man. He was gaunt, his skin a sickly gray. But it was his arms that made Izuku's breath itch. They weren't arms. From the elbows down, his limbs split into dozens of writhing, metallic cables, like fraying steel ropes. They scraped against the brick wall with a screech that set Izuku's teeth on edge. "I'm in a bit of a rush," the man said, his eyes darting frantically towards the street Izuku had just come from. He looked desperate. "Dangerous. And I need a hostage. Just for a few minutes. Don't make it loud." Izuku's brain, usually so quick to categorize villains and heroes, stalled. Villain type mutation. Distinctive features, wire arms. Threat level high. Distance 5 meters. I don't have any money, Izuku stammered, stepping back. His heel hit a discarded soda can. Clack. The sound acted like a starter pistol. The villain lunged. He didn't run. He used the wires. The cables shot out from his arms, embedding into the brick walls on either side of the alley. He pulled himself forward like a slingshot, closing the distance instantly. Izuku screamed. He threw his backpack, a clumsy, terrified defense. The villain slashed his left arm. The wires whipped through the air, slicing the backpack straps clean off. Izuku's bag hit the ground with a heavy thud. "Shut up!" the villain hissed. A coil of wire shot out, wrapping around Izuku's ankle. It felt like a vice. The metal was cold and tight. Izuku was yanked off his feet, slamming face first into the grime of the alley floor. The wind was knocked out of him. He scrambled, his fingernails scraping uselessly against the asphalt, but the villain was too strong. He was dragged backward, pulled toward the looming figure. "Just stay still," the villain growled, raising his other arm. The wires sharpened, twisting together to form a jagged spear point. "The heroes are chasing me. I just need a meat shield." Meat shield. That's what he was. Not a student. Not a boy. Just mass. Just matter to be used to absorb impact. "I'm going to die," Izuku realized. The thought was surprisingly calm, mathematical. Probability of survival, 1%. All Might isn't here. No one is here. The spear arm drew back, ready to strike, perhaps not to kill, but to maim, to ensure compliance. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut. He waited for the pain. Whoosh. It wasn't the sound of an impact. It was the sound of air being displaced rapidly. Then, a heavy, metallic thud. The grip on Izuku's ankle vanished. "Gah!" The villain screamed, a sound of genuine shock. Izuku opened his eyes. The villain was no longer standing over him. He had been knocked sideways, crashing into a stack of plastic crates. Standing between Izuku and the villain was a figure. Izuku blinked, trying to process the data. The figure was tall. Extremely tall. He wore a tan trench coat that billowed in the alley's draft. His face was obscured by a mask that looked like a giant, grinning jaw, grim and skeletal. But the most striking detail was his legs. They weren't flesh. They were pegs. Heavy, intricate prosthetics that dug into the asphalt. "Surrender," the hero said. His voice was deep, distorted slightly by the mask. It didn't boom like All Might's. It didn't crackle with excitement like Present Mix. It was flat, calm, and absolute. "Your trajectory has been intercepted." Ectoplasm, Izuku's mind supplied instantly. Rank 20 to 30 range. Quirk clones. Specializes in capture and suppression. Combat style, kick-based martial arts. The villain scrambled up, his eyes wide with panic. "Get out of my way! I'll skewer the kid," inefficient Ectoplasm said. The villain roared and lashed out with both arms. The wires exploded forward, filling the narrow alley with a storm of slashing metal. It looked impossible to dodge. There was no room to move. Izuku flinched, covering his head. But ectoplasm didn't dodge. From the hero's mouth, a thick, golden substance spewed out. It coalesced instantly, forming a shape. Then another. Then another. In the blink of an eye, there were 4 ectoplasms. Clone A dropped low, sliding under the wires with impossible flexibility for someone with peg legs. Clone B jumped, pushing off the wall to take the high ground. Clone C stood directly in front of Izuku, catching the wires with his bare hands. No, not hands. His hands had hardened, the ectoplasm density increased to act as a shield. The real ectoplasm didn't move. He watched. The villain panicked, retracting his wires to strike at the clones. Get off me! Clone A swept the villain's legs. The movement was a blur, a sharp, circular rotation of the prosthetic peg. The villain's feet were knocked out from under him. As he fell, Clone B dropped from the air, delivering a precise heel kick to the villain's shoulder. There was a sickening crunch, and the wire arm went limp. Target immobilized, the clones said in unison. The villain groaned, trying to lash out with his good arm. The real ectoplasm stepped forward. He moved with a strange, rhythmic gait. Step clack, step clack. He closed the distance and raised one leg. It wasn't a violent motion, it was a placement. He pressed the tip of his prosthetic against the villain's chest, right over the sternum. Movement will result in immediate unconsciousness, ectoplasm stated. Do the math. You have 1 working arm. I have 30 potential bodies. The odds are not in your favor. The villain froze. The fight had lasted less than 10 seconds. Izuku lay on the ground, his mouth agape. He had seen hero fights on TV. He had watched All Might change the weather with a punch. He had seen Kamui Woods bind giants. But he had never seen anything like this. This wasn't a brawl. It was an equation being solved. It was geometry in motion. Slowly, the clones dissolved into sludge and melted away, leaving only the real hero pinning the villain. Ectoplasm reached into his trench coat, pulled out a pair of quirk-suppressing cuffs, and snapped them onto the weeping villain. Only then did he turn his head. The gold-glowing eyes of the mask fixed on Izuku. Are you injured, civilian? Izuku scrambled to a sitting position. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a bird in a cage. He should say thank you. He should ask for an autograph. That's what he always did, but his brain was stuck on the replay of the fight. You shifted your weight, Izuku blurted out. Ectoplasm paused, his hand halfway to his radio. Excuse me? Izuku's hands flew to his mouth, but the words leaked through his fingers. He couldn't stop them. The anxiety was venting itself as analysis. The second clone. Clone B. When it dropped from the wall, it favored the right leg upon impact. And your entry. You used 3 clones instead of your maximum limit, which means you were conserving mass. Probably because you've been on patrol for a while and your caloric intake is running low. Or maybe because the alley is too narrow and more clones would have caused spatial interference. But the leg, is the calibration off? Or was that a feint to bait his guard low? Silence stretched in the alleyway. The villain, currently face down on the pavement, groaned. Can someone just take me to jail? Ectoplasm ignored the villain. He turned his body fully toward Izuku. The hero's posture was rigid, intimidating, but he tilted his head slightly to the side. You observed the torque on the clone's ankle? Ectoplasm asked. Izuku flinched, expecting a reprimand. I didn't mean to be rude. It was amazing. I analyze heroes. It's a hobby. I'm sorry. Ectoplasm stepped away from the villain, ensuring the criminal was secure, and approached Izuku. Up close, he was terrifying. A towering monolith of beige and black. Stand up, Ectoplasm commanded. Izuku scrambled to his feet, his knees knocking together. He dusted off his Gakurin uniform, wincing as he realized his knees were scraped and bleeding. You are not hurt critically, Ectoplasm observed. Just abrasions. I'm fine. Izuku squeaked. Thank you for saving me, Ectoplasm sir. I'm a huge fan. I know you teach at UA sometimes, and your capture rate is in the top 15% for urban environments and... Breathe, Ectoplasm interrupted. Izuku sucked in a breath and held it. Ectoplasm looked down at the boy. He saw the messy green hair, the oversized shoes, and the tear tracks on his dusty cheeks. He also saw the notebook lying in a puddle a few feet away. Hero analysis. You noticed the lag in the second clone, Ectoplasm said, his voice lowering. Most people only see the result. They see the villain fall. They do not see the variables leading to the collapse. It seemed logical, Izuku whispered. You cut off his escape routes. It was geometry. Heroism is geometry, Ectoplasm said, a hint of approval in his tone. It is about angles, force, and vectors. It is not magic. He gestured to the notebook. Is that yours? Izuku rushed to grab it. Yes. It's a bit wet. And burnt. But, burnt? Izuku hugged the book to his chest, hiding the scorch mark. Just a bad day at school. Ectoplasm was silent for a long moment. He was a man who dealt in facts, in hard numbers. He looked at the trembling boy, at the defensive posture, the flinch in his eyes. He calculated the sum of these parts: bullying, low self-esteem, high intellect, trauma. What is your name? Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya. Well, Midoriya-kun. You have a sharp eye. Keep honing it. Analysis is a weapon often undervalued. Ectoplasm turned back to the villain, tapping his radio. Dispatch, this is Ectoplasm. I have a 10 to 52 in the alley off 4th Street. Requesting police transport. It was a dismissal. The interaction was over. The hero had done his job. The civilian was safe. Izuku should go home. He should walk away, dry his notebook, and go back to being the outlier. But he couldn't move. The words Katsuki said? Take a swan dive. The words the doctor said 10 years ago. Give it up. The silence of the classroom. This hero used math. He used logic. He had prosthetic legs, a physical disability, yet he stood taller than anyone. If anyone could answer, it was him. Wait! Izuku shouted. Ectoplasm stopped, his back to the boy. Izuku's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He was shaking so hard his teeth rattled. This was it. The precipice. The variable that would define the rest of his life. Izuku choked. Tears pricked his eyes again, hot and stinging. I don't have a quirk. Ectoplasm turned his head slightly, listening. I'm quirkless. Izuku cried out, the secret ripping out of his throat. Everyone says I can't do it. Everyone says I'm useless. They say I should just die. He sobbed, a raw, ugly sound. He dropped his gaze to the dirty asphalt. But I want to save people. I want to be like the heroes who win. I want to calculate the odds and beat them. So please, he looked up, his eyes swimming with desperation, meeting the golden gaze of the pro-hero. Can I be a hero even without a quirk? The silence that followed was heavier than the one in the classroom. It stretched, tense and suffocating. The sounds of the city, distant sirens, traffic, seemed to fade away. Ectoplasm turned around fully. He walked back to Izuku. Clack. 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 He didn't smile. He didn't offer a thumbs up. He looked down at Izuku with the cold, hard scrutiny of a scientist examining a flaw in the data. No, Ectoplasm said. Izuku felt his heart shatter. It wasn't a crack. It was a total structural failure. His knees buckled, and he nearly fell, but he locked them, forcing himself to stand. He had expected it. He had calculated it, but hearing it, not as you are now, Ectoplasm continued. Izuku blinked, the tears blurring his vision. What? You are small, Ectoplasm listed, ticking points off on his gloved fingers. You have 0 muscle mass. You are timid. You flinch at sudden movements, and you possess no biological advantage to compensate for these deficits. It was a brutal assessment. It was the truth, however, Ectoplasm said, and the word hung in the air like a lifeline. You analyzed my combat mechanics in under 6 seconds while under extreme duress. That is a variable I cannot ignore. The hero leaned down, his skull mask inches from Izuku's face. Heroism is a deficit for the quirkless. You start at -100 while everyone else starts at 0. To bridge that gap, you cannot just try hard. You cannot just have spirit. Spirit does not stop a bullet. Spirit does not lift a bus. Ectoplasm pointed a finger at Izuku's chest. To be a hero, you would need to be perfect. You would need to turn your mind into a supercomputer, and your body into a weapon of absolute precision. You would need to use tools, strategy, and martial arts to simulate the effects of a quirk. The probability of success is less than 0.01%. Izuku stared at him. That's not zero. No, Ectoplasm agreed. It is not zero. The hero straightened up. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled piece of paper, a receipt from a convenience store. He took a pen and scribbled something on the back of it. I do not take apprentices. I do not have the time, and I do not have the patience for dreamers, Ectoplasm said coldly. He held out the paper. Izuku took it with trembling hands. It wasn't a phone number. It was a riddle. If a vessel has a capacity of 50 liters, but has a leak that drains 5 liters per minute, and you must fill it using a bucket that carries 3 liters but takes 30 seconds to travel from the source to the vessel, how do you keep the vessel full? Math? Izuku asked, confused. Logic, Ectoplasm corrected. It represents your life as a quirkless hero. You are the leaking vessel. The world drains you faster than you can replenish yourself. If you can solve that riddle, not just the math, but the application of it, meet me at the Dagoba Municipal Beach Park tomorrow at dawn. Sirens wailed nearby. The police were arriving. If you cannot solve it, Ectoplasm said, turning away as the blue lights flashed against the alley walls, then stay home, Midoriya. The numbers are cruel to those who cannot do the math. Izuku didn't remember walking the rest of the way home. His body moved on autopilot, navigating the streets while his mind was locked in a singular, feverish orbit around the piece of paper in his hand. I'm home! He called out as he entered the apartment, kicking off his red shoes. Izuku? You're late. His mother, Inko, bustled out of the kitchen. She looked worried, her hands fretting at her apron. I was about to call. Oh my goodness! Your uniform! What happened? She rushed over, her eyes widening at the dirt, the tear in his sleeve, and the scraped knees. I tripped, Izuku lied. It was a practiced lie. I took a shortcut and fell near some construction. Inko's face crumpled. Oh, Izuku. You have to be more careful. Come here, let me clean that up. She fussed over him, dabbing antiseptic on his knees and muttering about how dangerous the city was getting. Usually, Izuku would reassure her. He would smile and say he was fine, but tonight, he was silent. He let her bandage him, his eyes distant. Izuku? Inko asked softly, pulling back. Are you okay? Did something happen at school? Izuku looked at his mother. She loved him. He knew that. But she was also one of the people who had said, I'm sorry. She didn't believe he could be a hero. She wanted to protect him from the disappointment. He couldn't tell her. Not yet. Not until he changed the variable. I'm okay, Mom, he said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Just tired. I have a lot of homework. I'm going to go to my room. He retreated to his sanctuary. His room was a shrine to All Might. Posters, figures, bedsheets, the symbol of peace smiled down from every surface. For years, that smile had been his comfort. It promised that everything would be okay. Tonight, the smile felt distant. All Might was a god. He was born with power. He was the sun. Izuku sat at his desk and placed the crumpled receipt under the glow of his lamp. Next to it, he placed his burnt notebook. If a vessel has a capacity of 50 liters, he grabbed a fresh notebook. He picked up a pen. Okay, he muttered. Let's break it down. He started writing. Variable A, leak rate equals 5 liters per minute. Variable B, fill rate equals 3 L per 30 seconds equals 6 liters per minute. Mathematically it works, Izuku whispered. If you pour 6 liters a minute and lose 5, you gain 1 liter per minute. The vessel fills. He stared at the numbers. It was too simple. Ectoplasm wasn't a math teacher. He was a hero. He said not just the math, but the application. The bucket takes 30 seconds to travel, Izuku mumbled, chewing on the end of his pen. That implies distance. Travel time. Fatigue. He closed his eyes, visualizing the scenario. He is the runner. He runs to the water source. He fills the bucket. He runs back. He pours. Minute 1, gains 6L. Lose 5L. Net 1L. Minute 10, net 10L. But fatigue. A human cannot maintain max sprint speed indefinitely, Izuku reasoned. As time goes on, the 30-second travel time increases. 32 seconds. 35 seconds. 40 seconds. He scribbled a graph. The curve of fatigue. Once the travel time exceeds 36 seconds per trip, the fill rate drops below 5 liters per minute. The vessel starts to empty. Eventually it runs dry. You fail. Izuku stared at the paper. The math said it was impossible to keep it full forever solely by running. You would collapse. You would die. It's a trap, Izuku realized. He's telling me that if I try to be a hero by just working harder than everyone else, I'll burn out. I'll die. So, how do you solve it? Change the variables. I can't change the leak, Izuku muttered. The leak is the world. It's the villains. It's the danger. I can't change the vessel. That's me. I have to change the bucket. Or the source. He looked around his room. His eyes landed on a limited edition All Might action figure, the one with the detachable cape. Then his eyes drifted to a roll of duct tape on his bookshelf. Ectoplasm used clones, Izuku said to the empty room. He multiplied his output. But I don't have clones. He looked back at the riddle. You must fill it using a bucket. A bucket, he whispered. Singular. It doesn't say I can only use the bucket to carry water. It says I must use the bucket to fill the vessel. He started sketching furiously. If the distance is the problem, I need to shorten the distance. Or, his pen tore through the paper, bring the source to the vessel. Or, fix the leak. No, Ectoplasm said, how do you keep the vessel full? Implying the leak is constant. Izuku spent hours working the problem. He filled 5 pages with diagrams. He calculated flow rates. He analyzed the physics of water tension. At 3 a.m. he stopped. He looked at his final drawing. It wasn't a math solution. It was a strategic one. It was cheating, technically. But wasn't that what Ectoplasm did? He cheated the odds. 1 versus 1 became 31 versus 1. Izuku looked at his hands. They were stained with ink. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the crushing weight of the useless label. He felt a different kind of weight, the weight of a problem waiting to be solved. He packed his bag. He didn't pack his All Might figures. He packed rope. He packed duct tape. He packed a plastic water bottle. He packed his burned notebook. He dressed in his gym clothes, green tracksuits that hung loosely on his skinny frame. He looked in the mirror. He looked tired. He looked weak. I am the outlier, he whispered to his reflection. He turned off the lamp and slipped out of the apartment into the pre-dawn darkness. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park was a graveyard. It wasn't a place for the dead, but for the forgotten. Mountains of trash piled high, obscuring the horizon. Tires, broken appliances, rusted cars, rotting furniture. It was a monument to society's excess and laziness. The smell was a physical wall, rot and salt spray. Izuku stood at the edge of the sand, staring at the garbage. The sun was just beginning to crest over the ocean, painting the trash heaps in hues of orange and purple. Standing atop a pile of rusted refrigerators, silhouetted against the sunrise, was Ectoplasm. He looked like a gargoyle. His trench coat flapped in the sea breeze. He was perfectly still. Izuku took a deep breath. He navigated through the maze of junk until he was at the base of the refrigerator pile. You came, Ectoplasm said. He didn't look down. I did, Izuku answered. His voice shook, but he didn't stutter. Ectoplasm jumped down. He landed silently in the sand, his prosthetic legs absorbing the impact with practiced ease. And? Do you have the solution? The riddle is a trick, Izuku said. Ectoplasm tilted his head. Explain. If I rely solely on my physical ability to run back and forth with the bucket, I will eventually fatigue, Izuku said, holding up his notebook. According to my calculations based on average human endurance, I would fail after approximately 45 minutes. The vessel would drain. Correct, Ectoplasm said. Brute force leads to failure. So, did you give up? No, Izuku said. He reached into his bag and pulled out the roll of duct tape and the plastic bottle. He pointed to the ocean. I can't stop the leak. And I can't run forever. So, I have to change the method of delivery. Izuku walked over to a rusted pipe sticking out of the sand. The riddle said I have to use the bucket to fill the vessel. It didn't say I had to carry the bucket. Izuku gestured with his hands. I would use the bucket to scoop water, yes. But I wouldn't run. I would set up a relay. Or better yet, he pointed to the mountains of trash. I would use the resources available. There are pipes here. Hoses. Debris. I would build a siphon or an aqueduct. I would position the bucket at the top of the system to pour the water in, satisfying the condition of using the bucket, but I would let gravity do the work of the transport. Izuku looked Ectoplasm in the eye. A hero doesn't just use their body. They use their environment. If I can't be strong enough to carry the water, I have to be smart enough to build a pipeline. Ectoplasm stared at the boy. The wind rustled the trash around them. The hero had expected the boy to say run faster. Or get a bigger bucket. Most students, even the ones at UA, focused on power. More speed. Plus ultra. But this boy, this quirkless, trembling child, focused on infrastructure. He focused on efficiency. Ectoplasm let out a short, sharp breath. It might have been a laugh. A pipeline, Ectoplasm repeated. You would turn a test of endurance into a test of engineering. It's the only way to keep the vessel full indefinitely, Izuku said quietly. Because machines don't get tired. People do. Ectoplasm stepped forward. The intimidating aura vanished, replaced by something heavier, responsibility. You are correct, Midoriya. The answer is leverage. The hero gestured to the beach. To the miles of garbage. This beach is your vessel, Ectoplasm said. It is full of rot. Society has dumped its problems here because it is convenient. They expect someone else to clean it up. They expect an All Might to come along and blow it all away with a gust of wind. Ectoplasm looked at his own prosthetic legs. I cannot blow it away. And neither can you. He looked back at Izuku. I will not train you to be the next symbol of peace. I will not train you to be a pillar that holds up the sky. That is illogical. Pillars crumble. Izuku swallowed hard. Then, what will you train me to be? Ectoplasm's eyes narrowed. I will train you to be a variable. When the villains calculate their odds, when they account for the strong and the fast, you will be the error in their math. You will be the unseen factor that collapses their entire equation. He swept his hand across the horizon. Your training begins now. Your goal is not to clear this beach to make it pretty. Your goal is to clear this beach to learn how to move matter. To learn the physics of weight. To learn that a refrigerator is not just heavy, it is a weapon, it is a shield, it is a stepping stone. Ectoplasm got into a fighting stance. It was low, grounded, and terrifyingly precise. Put down your bag, Midoriya. Class is in session. And the first lesson is this: pain is just data. Process it, and keep moving. Izuku dropped his bag. He dropped the duct tape. He looked at the trash mountain. It was disgusting. It was impossible. He smiled. It was a shaky, terrified smile, but it was real. Yes, sensei. Izuku took his first step onto the sand. The sun rose fully behind him, casting long shadows across the beach. He wasn't All Might. He wasn't floating or exploding or hardening. He was just a boy with a notebook and a math problem. And for the first time in his life, the numbers were starting to make sense. The sunrise over Dagoba Municipal Beach Park was not beautiful. It was revealing. In the dark, the piles of trash were just looming silhouettes, mountains of mystery that could have been anything. But as the sun clawed its way over the horizon, casting a harsh, unforgiving light across the coastline, the mystery evaporated. It was rust. It was rot. It was the skeleton of a consumerist society left to bleach in the salt air. Izuku Midoriya stood at the base of a towering heap of scrap metal, his chest heaving. The adrenaline from solving the riddle had faded, replaced by the grim reality of what stood before him. This, Ectoplasm said, his voice cutting through the sound of the crashing waves, is the dataset. The pro-hero stood on a flat patch of sand, one of the few visible spots, looking like a specter of judgment. His trench coat was buttoned tight, his skull-like mask gleaming dully in the morning light. Izuku swallowed hard. The dataset, sir? The environment, Ectoplasm corrected. He tapped the side of his prosthetic leg with a gloved finger. Clink. A hero does not exist in a vacuum. A fight does not happen on a white sheet of paper. It happens here. In the mud. In the debris. Amidst the variables. He pointed a finger at a washing machine half buried in the sand about 10 meters away. It was old, rusted, and likely filled with wet sand. Move that, Ectoplasm ordered. Izuku blinked. Just move it. Did I stutter? No, sir. Izuku rushed forward. He was running on fumes. He hadn't slept, having spent the night dissecting the riddle, but he was fueled by a desperate need to prove himself. He reached the washing machine. It was slimy to the touch, covered in algae and barnacles. He gripped the edges. Okay, lift with your legs, not your back. He pulled. Nothing happened. The machine didn't even shift. It was anchored by the weight of the sand inside and the wet suction of the beach beneath it. Izuku gritted his teeth. He planted his feet, digging his red sneakers into the sand, and pulled again with a guttural grunt. NRRGH. His fingers slipped on the slime. He stumbled back, landing hard on his rear in a puddle of brackish water. Stop, Ectoplasm said. Izuku scrambled up immediately, wiping mud from his pants. I can do it. I just slipped. I need to. You need to stop acting like a protagonist in a shonen manga and start thinking like an engineer, Ectoplasm interrupted, his tone flat. He walked over, the thump hiss of his legs rhythmic and heavy. He stood over the washing machine. Mass, Ectoplasm stated. Roughly 70 kilograms dry. Filled with wet sand? Likely 150 kilograms. Friction coefficient of the wet sand beneath it. Hi. You weigh what? 50 kilograms? 48, Izuku mumbled, shame burning his cheeks. You are trying to apply force directly against an object 3 times your mass that is rooted in a high-friction environment. The result is mathematical failure. You exert force, the object resists, your traction fails, you fall. Ectoplasm looked at Izuku. The golden eyes of his mask seemed to bore into the boy's soul. All might would smash it, Ectoplasm said. He would apply enough force to overcome the mass and the friction instantly. He is an outlier. You are not. Izuku looked at his hands. They were trembling and covered in green slime. So, it's impossible for me? I did not say that. Ectoplasm turned and walked. No, he didn't walk. He moved with a strange, gliding efficiency, toward a pile of debris. He picked up a long, rusted iron pipe. He returned and jammed one end of the pipe under the base of the washing machine. He then kicked a cinder block under the pipe to act as a fulcrum. Archimedes, Ectoplasm said. Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall move the world. He looked at Izuku. Apply force to the end of the pipe. Izuku stepped forward. He placed his hands on the end of the iron pipe. He pushed down. With a sucking sound, thwack, the washing machine lifted out of the mud. It tilted. It was heavy, yes, but it moved. Leverage, Ectoplasm said. Mechanical advantage. This is your quirk, Midoriya. You cannot generate force like All Might. So you must multiply the force you do have through geometry and physics. Izuku stared at the pipe. He stared at the machine hovering inches above the mud. A spark lit up in his brain. It wasn't the blind hope he usually felt. It was something colder. Sharper. The assessment continues, Ectoplasm announced. Follow me. They walked to a clearer section of the beach, near the concrete steps that led up to the street. Ectoplasm sat on the bottom step. It was a jarring sight. Heroes usually stood tall. Seeing him sit made him look more human, more tangible. He unclipped a latch on his knee. With a hiss of pneumatics, he detached his lower left leg. Izuku gasped, then slapped a hand over his mouth. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to stare. Ectoplasm placed the prosthetic on the step next to him. It was a marvel of engineering, carbon fiber, titanium, and scuffed rubber. Why are you apologizing for observing data? Ectoplasm asked calmly. He began to inspect the connection port on his stump. Do you know how I lost them? Izuku hesitated. The incident in the sewers. 6 years ago. You were cornered by a villain with a corrosive sludge quirk. You saved 3 hostages, but the structural integrity of the tunnel collapsed, and the villain's acid. Izuku trailed off. He realized he was reciting a wiki entry to the man who had lived it. Accurate, Ectoplasm said. I was rank 42 at the time. I was fast. I was strong. I relied on my clones to overwhelm opponents. I thought numbers were the only math that mattered. More clones equaled more power. He reattached the leg with a sharp click. I was wrong. I fought a variable I couldn't punch. The acid dissolved my clones instantly. I lost my legs because I tried to outmuscle a chemical reaction. He stood up, towering over Izuku once more. I spent a year in rehabilitation. The doctors told me to retire. They said a hero without legs is a liability. They said I couldn't run. They said I couldn't jump. Ectoplasm suddenly moved. It was a blur. He dropped low, spun on his right leg, and delivered a high kick with his left that stopped mere millimeters from Izuku's nose. The wind pressure ruffled Izuku's bangs. Izuku didn't even have time to flinch. They were calculating based on a standard human model, Ectoplasm said, holding the kick, his balance perfect. They did not account for the redesign. He lowered his leg. I had to relearn how to walk. How to fight. I realized that my legs were no longer just limbs. They were tools. They are harder than bone. They do not feel pain. I can block blades with my shins. I can crush concrete with my heels. I turned a deficit into an asset. He pointed at Izuku. You are quirkless. Society sees a deficit. A missing piece. They look at you and see a man with no legs trying to run a marathon. Izuku looked down at his red shoes. The metaphor stung, but it rang true. But I see a blank slate, Ectoplasm continued. A quirk dictates how a hero fights. Bakugo Katsuki must fight with explosions. His style is dictated by his palms. Tenya Ida must fight with speed. His style is dictated by his engines. You, Ectoplasm leaned in. You have no dictates. You have no pre-installed software. That means we can install whatever we want. We can build your fighting style from the ground up, optimized for pure efficiency, unburdened by the reliance on a singular biological gimmick. I can be anything? Izuku whispered. You can be a variable, Ectoplasm corrected. A variable changes to fit the equation. But to do that, we must first assess the hardware. He held out a hand. Give me the notebook. The one you tried to hide yesterday. Izuku handed over the charred notebook. Hero Analysis for the Future. Number 13. It felt like handing over a piece of his soul. That book contained his dreams, his observations, his obsessive mutterings. He expected Ectoplasm to skim it, maybe nod, and say, good effort. Ectoplasm flipped to the first page. He stood in silence for a long minute. Then he flipped the page. Then another. Midoriya, Ectoplasm said. His voice was unreadable. Why yes? This is garbage. Izuku felt like he'd been slapped. What? I said this is garbage. Ectoplasm turned the book around, pointing to a sketch of Kamui Woods. Read this entry. Izuku squinted. Kamui Woods. Quirk Arbor. Incredible binding ability. Lacquered chain prison is a super cool move that can restrain multiple villains at once. He needs to be careful of fire types, but his agility allows him to move through urban environments like a spider. Rating, A+, fanfiction, Ectoplasm dismissed. You are writing a fan letter, not a dossier. But I noted his weakness to fire. Everyone knows what burns, Midoriya. That is not analysis, that is common sense. Ectoplasm flipped to another page. Mount Lady. Here. You focus on her size. Her strength. Her cannon. You are describing what she does. You are not analyzing how she does it, or more importantly, where she fails. Ectoplasm closed the book with a snap. You look at heroes with stars in your eyes. If you want to survive, you need to look at them with a scalpel. You need to look at All Might and not see a symbol of peace, but a target. A target? Izuku squeaked. But they're the good guys. In a sparring match, they are the opposition. If you cannot dismantle them mentally, you will never defeat a villain physically. Ectoplasm tossed the notebook back to Izuku. He fumbled to catch it. opened to a blank page. Izuku scrambled to comply, clicking his pen. Look at me, Ectoplasm commanded. Izuku looked. Analyze me? Right now. Do not tell me I have clones. Do not tell me I am a hero. Tell me how to beat me, how to beat you. Izuku stammered. But you're a pro. I can't. Do it or go home. The threat hung in the air. Izuku looked at the hero. He forced himself to push down the fanba who wanted to ask for an autograph. He forced himself to look at the man. You. Izuku started, his voice trembling. You rely on kicks. Obvious. Go deeper. Your legs, they're prosthetics. They don't have nerves. So, leg locks wouldn't work on the lower leg, Izuku muttered, his brain starting to whir. And impact pain won't stop you. But, the connection point. The knee. Ectoplasm didn't move. Continue, the transition from flesh to metal. That's a stress point. If someone were to strike the side of the knee joint, the mechanical torque might disengage the locking mechanism, or at least destabilize your balance. Plausible. What else? Izuku looked at the trench coat. The coat. It's long. It hides your leg movements, making your kicks harder to predict. But, it's also material. Excess material. And, in close quarters, it's a grip point. If I grabbed the coat, I could use your own momentum to pull you off balance. And your clones. What about them? You create them from your mouth. There's a delay? About 0.5 seconds? And you have to exhale to do it. That means, just before you clone, you have to inhale deeply. There's a tell. A breath intake. Izuku was muttering fast now, his eyes darting around. If I attack the moment you inhale, I interrupt the quirk activation. And since you're expelling mass, you might be momentarily lighter or disoriented right after creation. So the strategy would be, beta kick, dodge toward the blind side, grab the coat, wait for the inhale, strike the solar plexus to disrupt the breath, and sweep the organic knee. Silence. Izuku snapped out of his trance. He realized what he'd just said. He'd just verbally assaulted a pro-hero. I didn't mean. I'm sorry. Don't apologize, Ectoplasm said. For the first time, the hero's tone wasn't cold. It was interested. That, Ectoplasm said, was analysis. It was rough. It was theoretical. But it was logical. He walked over and tapped the notebook. Fill this book with that. Stop worshipping heroes. Start dissecting them. If you meet All Might, I want you to tell me which knee he favors. If you meet Endeavor, I want you to calculate the cooling rate of his flames. Understand? Yes, sir. Good. Now put the book away. Your brain is working. Now we see if your body can keep up. The physical assessment was not a standard gym test. There were no sit-ups. There was no shuttle run. Run to the end of the beach, Ectoplasm ordered. Through the trash. Through it? Did I say around it? The Dagoba beach trash piles were treacherous. It wasn't just soft sand, it was shifting dunes of tires, jagged metal, broken glass, and unstable appliances. Go. Izuku ran. 10 seconds in, he stepped on a pile of magazines that slid out from under him. He face-planted into a mattress that smelled of mildew. Get up, Ectoplasm's voice projected from the starting line. Izuku scrambled up. He tried to jump over a rusted bicycle, caught his foot on the pedal, and went down again, scraping his shin against the car bumper. Your center of gravity is too high. Ectoplasm shouted. You are running like you are on a track. Adapt. Izuku gritted his teeth. He lowered his hips. He tried to scramble on all fours over a pile of tires. It was exhausting. The uneven terrain forced his stabilizer muscles he didn't know he had, to fire constantly. By the time he reached the end of the beach and stumbled back, he was covered in scratches, bruises, and muck. He collapsed at Ectoplasm's feet, gasping for air like a fish on dry land. Time, 14 minutes, Ectoplasm said, checking a stopwatch. Pathetic. A villain would have killed you 40 times. Izuku wheezed, unable to form words. But Ectoplasm noted you didn't stop. You fell 19 times. You stood up 19 times. The hero knelt down. He didn't offer a hand. He just offered information. The gym creates false confidence, Ectoplasm explained. Floors are flat. Mats are soft. The world is not. If you want to fight quirkless, you cannot rely on overpowering your opponent. You must rely on mobility. You must be able to move where they cannot. He gestured to the trash. This is not garbage, Midoriya. This is a jungle gym. This is an obstacle course designed by chaos. If you can move through this fluidly, if you can sprint across shifting tires without looking down, then a flat sidewalk will feel like you are flying. Ectoplasm stood up. Lesson 1 of the variable style, proprioception. Knowing where your body is in space without having to look. You are clumsy. We will fix that. He pointed to a stack of tires. Balance on that stack. One leg. Sir, that stack is wobbling. Exactly. Get up there. Izuku climbed the tires. They shifted and compressed under his weight. He stood on one leg, arms windmilling wildly to stay upright. Close your eyes, Ectoplasm ordered. Are you crazy? Villains strike from the shadows. Smoke screens. Power outages. If you need your eyes to balance, you are dead. Close them. Izuku closed his eyes. Immediately, the world spun. Without the visual horizon, his inner ear panicked. He leaned too far left. The tires shifted. He fell. He hit the sand hard. Again, Ectoplasm said. This is torture, Izuku groaned, rubbing his shoulder. This is calculus, Ectoplasm corrected. Your brain is calculating the shift of the tires. It is learning to listen to the nerves in your feet. Again, Izuku climbed back up. He closed his eyes. He lasted 2 seconds. Again. 3 seconds. Again. This continued for an hour. Izuku's legs were shaking so bad they felt like jelly. His equilibrium was shot. He felt nauseous. But on the 50th attempt, something happened. He closed his eyes. He felt the tires shift to the right. Instead of panicking, his left toe dug in reflexively. He bent his knee, lowering his center of mass. He wobbled, but he didn't fall. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. Open. Izuku opened his eyes. He was still standing. Ectoplasm nodded, a microscopic movement. Adequate. You are learning to listen to the data your body provides. The sun was high in the sky now. The assessment was drawing to a close. We have 10 months until the UA entrance exam, Ectoplasm said. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. A schedule. Mornings, 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. Physical conditioning and terrain traversal here at the beach. Afternoons, after school to 7 p.m. Martial arts basics. We will use the dojo at my agency on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Other days we use the beach. Nights, tactical study. I will assign you footage of hero fights. You will analyze them using the new method. I expect a 500-word essay on the structural flaws of a different pro-hero every week. Izuku took the schedule. It was brutal. It left almost no free time. What about studying for school? Izuku asked. Do that in class? You're smart. You don't need to study at home. Multitask. Ectoplasm crossed his arms. I am not charging you for this training. But the cost is high. The cost is your ego. You will fail every day. You will fall every day. I will not comfort you. I will not tell you good job for doing the bare minimum. He leaned in close. I am giving you the equation for survival. But you have to solve it yourself. Do you accept? Izuku looked at the schedule. He looked at the beach, which seemed even larger and filthier than before. He looked at the hero who had saved him, not with a smile, but with a math problem. He thought about All Might. All Might was a distant sun. Warm, but untouchable. Ectoplasm was gravity. Harsh, constant, and grounding. I accept, Izuku said. His voice was raspy, but steady. Good. Then your first assignment is simple. Ectoplasm pointed to a rusted pickup truck buried up to its windows in debris about 50 meters away. Map a path from here to that truck. Calculate the fastest route that minimizes contact with the ground. You have 30 seconds to plan. Then you run it. Parkour? Izuku asked. Variable movement. Go. Izuku scanned the trash. Tires stacked to the fridge. Jump to the car hood. Slide down the paneling. Leap to the truck. Time's up. Move. Izuku took off. He hit the tires. He wobbled but held. He jumped to the fridge. It was slicker than he thought. He slipped, his shin banging hard against the metal handle. Pain shot up his leg, white-hot and blinding. Pain is data, he repeated in his head. The surface is slick. Adjust grip. He didn't stop. He scrambled up, limping slightly, and threw himself toward the car hood. Ectoplasm watched him. He saw the clumsy form. He saw the lack of muscle. But he also saw the boy adjusting his footing in real time. He saw him calculating. For the first time in years, the math hero felt a variable shift in his own internal calculations. Probability of failure, high, Ectoplasm thought. But the margin of error is decreasing. Izuku walked into his apartment at 7:45 a.m. He smelled like low tide and old rust. His uniform was in his bag. He had changed back into his school clothes in a public restroom, but he couldn't wash the exhaustion off his face. Izuku? Inko called from the kitchen. You're back early? Did you go for a run? Yeah, Mom, Izuku called back, heading straight for the shower. Just decided to start jogging. For health. He turned on the shower, letting the hot water sting his fresh cuts. He watched the water swirl down the drain, dark with dirt and sand. He looked at his reflection in the fogged mirror. He looked the same. Same freckles. Same messy hair. But his eyes, they looked different. They weren't the wide, watery eyes of a victim anymore. They were tired. They were focused. They were analyzing the condensation patterns on the glass. He finished showering and dressed for school. Alder at junior high awaited. Walking into class felt different today. Usually, Izuku tried to make himself invisible. He hunched his shoulders. He kept his head down. Today, he walked in and sat down. His legs ached with a dull thrum that was almost comforting. It was a secret pain. A pain he had chosen. Bakugo kicked his desk as he walked by. Oh, Deku. You smell like trash. Finally sleeping where you belong? The class snickered. Usually Izuku would flinch. He would stutter a denial. Today, Izuku looked up. He didn't look at Bakugo's face. He looked at Bakugo's stance. Right foot forward. Weight distributed on the balls of his feet. Shoulders tense. Palms open slightly, ready for ignition. Analysis. He's looking for a reaction. If I react, he escalates. If I ignore, he gets bored or annoyed. The most efficient path to silence is non-engagement. Morning, Kaken, Izuku said calmly. Then he opened his textbook and started reading. Bakugo froze. His eyes narrowed. The lack of fear, the lack of stuttering, it didn't compute. Ha! Bakugo growled, small sparks popping in his palm. You ignoring me, nerd? I'm studying, Izuku said, not looking up. Variables. Variables? What the hell are you talking about? Math, Izuku said. You wouldn't be interested. Bakugo stared at him for a second longer, confused by the shift in dynamic. It wasn't defiance, it was dismissal. Izuku wasn't fighting back. He was just existing outside of Bakugo's influence. Bakugo scoffed and walked away, muttering about creepy nerds. Izuku let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. His hands were shaking under the desk. It was terrifying. But it worked. He pulled out a small notepad, not his main analysis book, but a pocket one Ectoplasm had told him to carry. He wrote, Subject Bakugo. Intimidation relies on feedback loop. Remove feedback loop breaks. Efficiency increased. He smiled. A small, dry smile. The assessment was over. The variables were set. Now, the equation truly began. Axiom I. In a system of variables, the constant is pain. The first month was not training. It was demolition. It was the systematic dismantling of a 14-year-old boy, stripping him down to his base components, bone, breath, and desperate hope, so that something functional could be built from the scrap. Izuku Midoriya stood on the Dagoba Municipal Beach at 5:15 a.m. The sun was a bleeding wound on the horizon, spilling crimson light across the miles of garbage. He wasn't moving trash today, he was holding a pose. Lower, Ectoplasm's voice commanded. Izuku's legs screamed. He was in a deep horse stance, Kibadachi, his thighs parallel to the sand. His arms were held out in front of him, each hand gripping a heavy, waterlogged phone book wrapped in duct tape. My legs are shaking, Sensei," Izuku gritted out, sweat stinging his eyes. "Good," Ectoplasm said from his perch atop a rusted van. "That is the vibration of weakness leaving the muscle fibers. It is a necessary variable." "Hold," Izuku held. His quadriceps felt like they were being braided with hot wire. "You are quirkless," Ectoplasm lectured, his voice cutting through the roar of the ocean. "This means you lack the alpha factor, the biological cheat code that allows a human to surpass their limits instinctively. A person with a strength quirk does not need to understand biomechanics, they just punch. You do not have that luxury." The hero jumped down, the clack hiss of his prosthetics landing in the sand. He circled Izuku like a shark. "Your power must come from kinetic chains. From the ground up. If your legs are weak, your foundation is weak. If your foundation is weak, the equation collapses." "Lower." Izuku sank an inch lower. A whimper escaped his throat. "Do not cry," Ectoplasm said, tapping Izuku's trembling knee with a cane he had started carrying, not for walking, but for correction. "Tears are a loss of hydration. Inefficient." "I'm not crying," Izuku gasped. "I'm leaking excess fluid." "Humor. A defense mechanism." "Interesting." Ectoplasm checked his stopwatch. 5 more minutes. 5 minutes. It sounded short. In the context of a lifetime, it was a blink. In a horse stance, holding wet phone books, it was an eternity. Izuku closed his eyes. He didn't think about the pain. He thought about the math. Force equals mass x acceleration. Stability equals center of gravity / base of support. If he widened his stance too much, he lost mobility. If he narrowed it, he lost stability. He had to find the golden ratio. He shifted his feet millimeter by millimeter, digging his toes into the sand until he found the point where the trembling reduced by a fraction. "Time," Ectoplasm called. Izuku collapsed. He didn't fall gracefully. His legs simply ceased to exist, and he face-planted into the sand. He lay there, breathing in the scent of salt and old rubber, feeling the cool dampness against his burning skin. "Get up," Ectoplasm said immediately. "Hydrate. Then we run." "Run?" Izuku wheezed, rolling onto his back. "Sensei, I can't feel my toes." "You don't need to feel them to use them. Nerve impulses are just electrical signals." "Override the signal." Izuku groaned, but he pushed himself up. He grabbed his water bottle, the one he had used for the riddle weeks ago, and downed half of it. This was his life now. The morning was for the body. The afternoon was for the mind. And the night was for the reconstruction of his worldview. He looked at Ectoplasm, who was already walking toward the makeshift obstacle course of tires and refrigerators. "Sensei?" "Moving, Midoriya. The villains are not waiting for your lactic acid to dissipate." Izuku stumbled after him. He was tired. He was sore. He was miserable. But he was also, for the first time in his life, getting stronger. Axiom 2, the shortest distance to a target is rarely a straight line. By the middle of month 2, the venue changed. Tuesdays and Thursdays were no longer beach days. They were dojo days. Ectoplasm's agency was located in a brutalist concrete building in the city center. It was unassuming, much like the hero himself. The dojo on the 3rd floor was stark. Gray mats. White walls. No mirrors. "Mirrors make you vain," Ectoplasm had said on the first day. "They make you watch yourself. You should be watching the opponent." Today, the lesson was specific. Izuku stood in the center of the mat, wearing a plain white gi that was slightly too big for him. He felt ridiculous. He looked like a child playing dress-up. "Why legs?" Izuku asked, adjusting his belt. Ectoplasm stood opposite him. He had removed his heavy trench coat, revealing a sleek, black bodysuit that highlighted the terrifying mechanics of his prosthetics. The metal legs connected to his thighs with complex, distinct ports. "Excuse me?" Ectoplasm asked. "Why do you specialize in kicks?" Izuku clarified, pulling a notebook from his gym bag. He was allowed to take notes for exactly 2 minutes before sessions. "I mean, I know you have prosthetics, but you were a close combat hero before the injury too. Why kicks?" Most heroes prefer punches. All Might, Death Arms, Endeavor, they're all upper body dominant. Reach, Ectoplasm said simply. He lifted his right leg. He didn't just lift it, he chambered it, knee-high, foot tucked. The average human arm is roughly 75 centimeters long. The average leg is over a meter. In a fight, distance is time. If I can hit you before you can reach me, I control the timeline of the battle. He set the leg down. Furthermore, the legs contain the largest muscle groups in the body. The quadriceps, glutes, hamstrings. A punch uses the shoulder and tricep, perhaps some latissimus if thrown correctly. A kick uses the entire body weight. Ectoplasm pointed at Izuku's arms. They were skinny. There was some definition forming after 6 weeks of moving trash, but they were still twigs. You will never knock out a villain with a punch, Midoriya. Your bone density and muscle mass are insufficient. If you punch a mutant-type villain like the one we met in the alley, you will break your wrist. Izuku looked at his hands. He remembered trying to punch the sludge villain months ago, or rather claw at him. It had been useless. But your legs? Ectoplasm continued. Even a scrawny leg can generate force if the mechanics are perfect. We are going to turn your legs into pistons. So, Taekwondo? Izuku asked. Muay Thai? Neither. Both. We are not learning a sport. We are learning geometry. Ectoplasm walked over to a heavy bag hanging in the corner. Strike the bag. Use your hands. Izuku stepped up. He threw a punch. It was decent, he'd been studying videos, but it made a dull thud. The bag barely swung. Now, Ectoplasm said. Turn your hips. Pivot on the ball of your foot. Whip the leg. Imagine your shin is a baseball bat. Izuku tried. He wound up, spun, and threw a roundhouse kick. His form was terrible. He leaned back too far. His balance wavered. His shin slapped the bag with a stinging smack rather than a thud. Ow, Izuku hissed, hopping on one foot. Inefficient, Ectoplasm diagnosed. You are thinking about the impact. You stop the kick at the surface of the bag. He tapped the bag. You do not kick at the target. You kick through the target. The target is just a variable that occupies the space you are traveling through. Aim for the air behind the bag, Ectoplasm demonstrated. He didn't look like he was trying hard. He simply rotated. His prosthetic leg was a blur of black metal. Boom! The heavy bag folded in half. It swung violently, the chain rattling against the ceiling mount. The sound was like a gunshot. Izuku's jaw dropped. That, Ectoplasm said, is the equation solved. Force equals mass times acceleration, squared by rotation. Now do it again. 500 times. 500? Per leg. Begin. Izuku began. Kick 1, smack. Pain. Kick 10, thud. Off balance. Kick 50. His shin felt like it was on fire. Kick 100. He stopped thinking about the pain and started thinking about the pivot. Rotate the hip. Open the pelvis. Ectoplasm watched in silence. He saw the boy's micro-adjustments. Most students needed to be told to turn their heel. Izuku did it after watching his own shadow. He was analyzing his own failure in real time. Stop, Ectoplasm said at kick 140. Izuku froze, panting. Did I do it wrong? Your arms, Ectoplasm said. They are flailing. You are using them for balance. Is that bad? It is wasteful. In a hero fight, your hands are your utility. They are for rescuing civilians. They are for operating support gear. They are for grappling. If you need them to balance, you cannot use them to save. Ectoplasm walked to a supply closet and pulled out a length of rope. Turn around. Sensei? Hands behind your back. Ectoplasm bound Izuku's wrists together behind him. Not tight enough to cut circulation, but tight enough to render his arms useless. Now kick, Ectoplasm ordered. But I'll fall, then fall. And figure out how not to. Izuku stared at the bag. Without his arms as counterweights, he felt like a toppling tower. He threw a kick. He spun too far, lost his axis, and crashed onto the mat. Again. He got up. Kick. Fall. Again. Kick. Fall. Think, Midoriya. Where is your center of gravity? Izuku lay on the mat, staring at the ceiling lights. Center of gravity. Without arms, the mass is concentrated in the torso. To compensate for the legs swinging out, I need to lean the torso, but not too far. He imagined a pendulum. He imagined a gyroscope. He stood up. He didn't throw the kick immediately. He leaned his upper body slightly forward and to the right, preloading the weight. Then, he snapped the left leg. Thud. He wobbled, hopping once, but he didn't fall. Better, Ectoplasm said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Now 360 more. Don't stop until the math becomes muscle memory. Axiom 3. In a chaotic system, pattern recognition is the only predictor. Month 3 brought the clones. Until now, Ectoplasm had been a teacher. A coach. Now, he became the enemy. The beach had changed. Izuku had cleared a substantial area, a circle roughly 20 meters in diameter, free of sharp metal and glass. The sand was packed down from weeks of drills. Today, Ectoplasm announced, we introduce variable quantities. He stood in the center of the circle. Up until now, you have fought gravity. You have fought friction. You have fought a heavy bag. Those are static variables. They do not think. They do not react. He opened his mouth, and the thick, golden sludge poured out. It bubbled and rose, forming a perfect replica of the hero. Then another. Then another. 3 ectoplasms stood before Izuku. 4, counting the original. Izuku swallowed. 4 against 1? Fair odds for a hero, the original said. Villains rarely work alone. And even if they do, a single villain can have a quirk that attacks from multiple angles. The clones spread out. They didn't take aggressive stances. They just stood there, menacingly calm. Your objective is not to win, Ectoplasm said. You cannot win. Your objective is survival. Last 3 minutes without being pinned. 3 minutes? Izuku tightened the straps of his gloves, cheap gardening gloves he used to protect his hands from the trash. That sounds doable. Begin. The air changed. Clone A lunged. It didn't telegraph. One moment it was still, the next the prosthetic leg was aiming for Izuku's ribs. Izuku yelped and scrambled back. He tripped over his own feet, falling onto his butt. The kick sailed over his head. Clone B was already there. It grabbed Izuku's collar and threw him. He flew 5 meters, landing in a pile of soft sand. One variable, Ectoplasm called out. You focused on A and lost track of B. Tunnel vision. Izuku scrambled up, spitting sand. That was fast. Villains are fast. Again, the next 3 weeks were a blur of bruises. Izuku learned that fighting one person was chess. Fighting 3 people was a riot. There was no time to think words. He couldn't mutter, if he kicks with his right, I should block left. By the time the sentence started, he was already hit. He had to think in shapes. Week 10, Day 4. Izuku stood in the center. He was panting, his tracksuit torn at the shoulder. 3 clones circled him. Triangle formation, Izuku's mind supplied. Standard encirclement. They will attack in sequence to break rhythm. Clone C twitched. Izuku didn't wait for the attack. He saw the twitch, the shift of weight in the hip. Left flank incoming. Izuku dropped. He didn't dodge away. He dodged into the attack, sliding under the high kick. Ha! Izuku grinned. Clone A swept his legs from behind. Izuku hit the ground hard. Pattern recognition failed, Ectoplasm stated. You predicted the attack, but you did not predict the follow-up. You are playing checkers. They are playing Go. Izuku pounded the sand. It's impossible. There's too much input. Is there? Ectoplasm dissolved the clones. He walked over to Izuku. You have a habit, Midoriya. You watch the face. The eyes, they tell you where they're looking. Lies, Ectoplasm said. A master lies with his eyes. He looks left and strikes right. But the body cannot lie. Gravity is absolute. He pointed to his own waist, the hips, the shoulders, the center of mass. To kick, I must shift weight. To punch, I must rotate. Watch the core, not the extremities. The core screams the attack long before the fist arrives. Watch the core. Izuku stood up. Again. Week 11, Day 2. The sun was setting, casting long, confusing shadows across the beach. 3 clones. Izuku didn't look at their masks. He unfocused his eyes, taking in the whole picture. He watched their waists. Clone B shifted weight to the back leg. Front kick loading. Clone A dropped a shoulder. Low sweep loading. Izuku's brain processed the geometry. 2 vectors intersecting at his position. Vector 1 high. Vector 2 low. Escape route, vertical. Izuku jumped. He tucked his knees to his chest. Clone B's kick passed under him. Clone A's sweep missed entirely. As he fell, he realized Clone C was waiting. A clothesline. Mid-air adjustment needed. Izuku couldn't fly. But he had legs. He kicked out, not to attack, but to push. He stomped on Clone B's extended leg, using it as a platform to launch himself backward, out of Clone C's range. He landed in a crouch, 5 meters away. Safe. Time, Ectoplasm called. Izuku looked up, beaming. I did it. I saw it. Ectoplasm nodded slowly. You used an opponent as a foothold. Resourceful. You are starting to see the flow, Midoriya. You are no longer reacting to the variables. You are manipulating them. For the first time, Ectoplasm reached into his coat and pulled out a protein bar. He tossed it to Izuku. Refuel. Tomorrow, we add a 4th clone. Izuku groaned, peeling the wrapper. You're a sadist, sensei. I am a teacher. There is often overlap. Axiom 4. Data collected in isolation must be tested in the field. School had become a strange experience for Izuku. For years, Aldera Junior High had been a minefield. Every hallway was a danger zone. Every laugh was a threat. He walked with his shoulders hunched, trying to occupy the minimum amount of volume possible. But now school felt slow. Izuku sat in English class, listening to present mixed radio show quietly through one earbud, a habit Ectoplasm allowed as auditory multitasking training. The teacher was droning on about participles. Izuku looked at his hand. He flexed his fingers. There were calluses on his knuckles from the heavy bag. There were calluses on his palms from gripping rusted metal. Under his uniform, his body was covered in a map of yellow and purple bruises, the tuition fees of the Ectoplasm Academy. He felt heavy. Anchored. Thwack. Something hit the back of his head. A crumpled ball of paper. Hey, Deku, a voice whispered. Not Bakugo. One of his lackeys. Fingers. Spacing out? Planning your funeral? Izuku didn't flinch. 3 months ago, he would have jumped. He would have turned around, eyes wide, and stuttered an apology. Now, his brain processed the input automatically. Object, paper ball. Mass, negligible. Velocity, low. Threat, 0. Izuku didn't turn around. He reached back, casually picked the paper off his desk, and dropped it into the trash can next to him without looking. He didn't miss a beat of the lecture. The lackey scoffed. Ignoring me? Weirdo. Izuku just kept writing. It wasn't bravery. It was efficiency. He had spent the morning dodging supersonic kicks from a pro hero. A paper ball was mathematically insignificant, but not everything was insignificant. Katsuki Bakugo was watching. From the front row, Bakugo glanced back. His red eyes narrowed. He had been watching Izuku for weeks. The nerd wasn't following him anymore. He wasn't mumbling Kaken, wait up. He wasn't even writing in those creepy notebooks during lunch. He was sleeping in the library or doing weird calisthenics behind the gym. And he looked different. Not bigger, exactly. But denser. He walked differently. He didn't scuffle his feet. He walked heel to toe, silent and rhythmic. It pissed Bakugo off. It pissed him off because the pebble was supposed to stay on the side of the road. But the pebble was starting to act like a rock. The bell rang. Midoriya, a word about your career form? The teacher called out. Yes, sensei, Izuku said, packing his bag. By the time Izuku left the faculty office, the sun was dipping low. The hallways were mostly empty. He needed to hurry. He was late for training. Ectoplasm hated lateness. He turned the corner toward the shoe lockers. The voice was low. Dangerous. Like a grenade with the pin pulled halfway out. Izuku stopped. He didn't turn immediately. He took a breath. Inhale for 4. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. He turned. Katsuki Bakugo stood at the end of the hallway, blocking the exit. His hands were in his pockets, but smoke was already curling from them. Kaken, Izuku said. His voice was level. You've been acting weird, Deku, Bakugo said, walking forward slowly. Step. 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 You think you're better than me? You think because you stopped following me, you're suddenly some big shot? I'm just busy, Kaken, Izuku said, adjusting his backpack strap. I have hobbies. Hobbies? Bakugo stopped 3 meters away. You mean playing hero? I saw you at the beach the other day. Moving trash. You think being a garbage man is gonna get you into UA? Izuku stiffened. He hadn't realized Bakugo had seen him. It's community service, Izuku lied. A half-truth. Bulls, Bakugo spat. He pulled his hands from his pockets. Pop crackle. You're scheming something. You always are. You think you can look down on me? I don't look down on you, Izuku said honestly. I look at you and I see. He paused. The analysis filter clicked on. He looked at Bakugo. Really looked at him. Stance, aggressive. Right shoulder dropped. Left foot forward. He's leading with his dominant side. Quirk, explosion. Activation time, instant. Range, close to mid. Habit, he starts with a right hook. Always. It's his opening statement. I see someone with a lot of potential, Izuku finished. Potential? Bakugo roared. Don't patronize me, you quirkless reject. Bakugo lunged. It happened in slow motion. Izuku's brain, tempered by thousands of clone attacks, dissected the movement. 1. Bakugo pushes off the back foot. Explosive propulsion. 2. Right arm draws back. The wind up. 3. Target face. Standard right hook. Oversized swing due to ego. Counter strategy. Option A, block. Result, burns. Arm fracture likely. Option B, retreat. Result, wall impact. Cornered. Option C, redirect. Ectoplasm's voice, use their momentum. You are the fulcrum. Bakugo was fast. Faster than the clones. But he was angry. Anger made him predictable. He put too much weight into the swing. Izuku didn't think. His body just moved. He stepped in. It was counterintuitive. Bakugo expected him to run away. By stepping into the guard, Izuku entered the eye of the storm. Bakugo's fist sailed past Izuku's ear. The heat of the explosion singed his hair. Izuku dropped his center of gravity. He grabbed Bakugo's outstretched right arm with both hands, gripping the sleeve of the uniform, avoiding the sweating palms. He pivoted on his left foot. He placed his hip against Bakugo's hip. Leverage. Izuku pulled the arm down and popped his hips up. It wasn't a hero move. It wasn't a smash. It was basic judo. Suinage. Bakugo's feet left the ground. For a split second, the explosive boy was weightless. His eyes went wide, red irises shrinking in shock. The world tilted. Wham! Bakugo hit the linoleum floor of the hallway flat on his back. The air left his lungs in a wheeze. Silence. Absolute, ringing silence. Izuku stood over him, hands still raised in the follow-through position. He was breathing hard, eyes wide. I threw him. I threw Kaken. Bakugo lay there, staring at the ceiling. His brain had short-circuited. He hadn't been punched. He hadn't been blasted. He had just flipped. The pebble had flipped the mountain. Slowly, the shock turned to rage. Pure, unadulterated fury. DKU. Bakugo scrambled up, explosions popping wildly in his hands. I'll kill you! Izuku flinched. The old fear spiked. But then, the math kicked in. Threat level, critical. Diplomacy, failed. Escape, only option. Sorry, Kaken. Reflex. Izuku turned and bolted. He didn't run like he used to, arms flailing, head back. He ran like Ectoplasm taught him. Knees high, elbows tucked, banking off the wall to take the corner at full speed without losing momentum. Get back here! An explosion scorched the wall where Izuku had been a second ago. Izuku burst out of the school doors, vaulted over the low gate, one hand planted, legs swinging through, parkour, and sprinted down the street. He ran for 3 blocks before he dared to look back. No Bakugo. He stopped in an alleyway, leaning against the brick wall, gasping for air. His heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs, but he was smiling. He looked at his hands. They weren't shaking from fear. They were shaking from adrenaline. I didn't freeze, he whispered. I calculated. Axiom V, the variable is no longer 0. That evening, the sun had fully set over Dagoba Beach. The piles of trash cast long, creepy shadows under the streetlights. Izuku was late. You're 7 minutes late, Ectoplasm said from the darkness. He was sitting on a stack of tires, his eyes glowing. I know. I'm sorry. Izuku jogged onto the sand, dropping his bag. I had a variable encounter. A variable encounter? Ectoplasm raised an eyebrow behind his mask. Explain, Bakugo, Izuku said, catching his breath. He cornered me. He tried to use his quirk. Ectoplasm stood up slowly. The air around him grew cold. Did he injure you? No, Izuku said. He stood up straighter. He missed. He missed? Bakugo Katsuki has excellent spatial awareness. He rarely misses? He didn't miss, Izuku corrected himself. I made him miss. I stepped inside his guard. I used the hip throw. The one we practiced last Tuesday. Ectoplasm paused. He looked at the boy. He saw the singed tips of his green hair. He saw the dirt on his uniform knees. But mostly, he saw the posture. Izuku wasn't hunched over. He was standing with his feet shoulder-width apart, weight balanced. Ready. And the result? Ectoplasm asked. He hit the floor. I ran away. You retreated to a safe location after neutralizing the immediate threat, Ectoplasm corrected. That is not running away. That is a tactical withdrawal. The hero walked over to Izuku. He placed a heavy hand on the boy's shoulder. 3 months ago, you would have been burned. You would have been a victim. Yes, sir. Today, you were a combatant. Ectoplasm squeezed the shoulder briefly, a rare gesture of pride. The axioms are taking root. You are beginning to understand. You do not need to be stronger than the explosion, Midoriya. You just need to be smarter than the fuse. Izuku beamed. It was the first time he felt it, truly felt it. The possibility. Now, Ectoplasm said, his tone shifting back to the drill sergeant. Since you were 7 minutes late, you owe me 7 sets of beach sprints. With the parachute. Izuku's smile vanished. The parachute? But the wind is strong tonight, then the resistance will be greater. The math checks out. Go. Izuku groaned and grabbed the resistance chute from the equipment pile. He strapped it to his waist. As he lined up for the sprint, he looked out at the ocean. The dark water churned, endless and powerful. He wasn't All Might. He would never be the sun that banished the dark. But as he dug his feet into the sand, preparing to run against the wind, Izuku realized something else. You don't need to be the sun to navigate the dark. You just need to know the geometry of the shadows. Start. Izuku ran. The parachute caught the wind, pulling him back, trying to drag him down. He leaned forward. He drove his legs. Pistons. Levers. Force. He kept moving. Variable 0, the hypothesis. The day began with a miscalculation. It was 5:30 a.m. at Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. The air was crisp, tasting of salt and impending summer. Izuku Midoriya was currently upside down, hanging by his knees from a rusted pull-up bar that Ectoplasm had welded onto the side of a shipping container. Blood flow, Ectoplasm stated, standing below him with a stopwatch. Inversion therapy increases cerebral perfusion. It also disorients your inner ear. Solve the following. Izuku grunted, his face turning red as gravity pulled the blood into his skull. Ready, Sensei. A villain throws a projectile at 30 meters per second from a distance of 15 meters. Your reaction time is 0.2 seconds. Do you dodge or block? Dodge. Izuku choked out. Time to impact is 0.5 seconds. Minus reaction time, I have 0.3 seconds to move. Blocking requires bracing, which takes maybe 0.4 seconds to establish a solid base given my current muscle mass. Dodging requires only a lateral shift of center of gravity. Dodge is the only solution with a survival probability above 80%. Correct, Ectoplasm said. Drop. Izuku unhooked his knees. He flipped in the air, a clumsy, flailing rotation, and landed in a crouch. He wobbled, his head spinning, but he didn't fall. He slapped the sand to steady himself. Recovery time is improving, Ectoplasm noted, marking something on his clipboard. 10 months ago, you would have vomited. Izuku stood up, wiping sand from his palms. I still want to vomit, sensei. Suppress it. Vomiting is a loss of electrolytes. Ectoplasm looked at the horizon. The sun was fully up now. It was the last day of school before the summer break leading up to the high school entrance exams, though those were still 10 months away. But today felt heavy. The air pressure was low. Midoriya, Ectoplasm said, his tone shifting from instructor to mentor. Yes, sir, you have absorbed the axioms. You understand leverage. You understand pattern recognition. But there is one variable we cannot simulate in a controlled environment. Izuku grabbed his water bottle. What's that? Chaos, Ectoplasm said. True, unbridled chaos. The moment when the equation breaks, when the numbers stop making sense, and the only thing left is the will to act. I cannot teach you that. You have to find it. Izuku looked at his hands, scarred, calloused, stronger than they had been, but still the hands of a quirkless boy. I'll do my best to calculate it when it comes. Ectoplasm's golden eyes narrowed behind his mask. Calculations take time. Chaos does not give refunds on seconds lost. Remember that today. It was a strange warning. Izuku didn't know it then, but it was a foreshadowing. A premonition from a man who had lived through enough chaos to smell it on the wind. Variable 1. The tunnel. The school day dragged. The classroom was a stagnant box of heat and boredom. Izuku spent the hours practicing his grip strength with a stress ball under his desk, his eyes focused on the chalkboard but his mind dissecting the teacher's pacing habits. 3 steps left, check watch, 2 steps right, check watch. When the final bell rang, Izuku packed his bag with practiced efficiency. Hero analysis number 13 went into the protected inner pocket. Oh, Deku. Izuku paused. He didn't flinch. He just stopped his kinetic chain, freezing his hand halfway to the zipper. He turned his head. Katsuki Bakugo stood there, his 2 lackeys flanking him like cheap NPCs in an RPG. Bakugo looked irritated, which was his default setting, but there was something else in his eyes lately. Confusion. Resentment. Kaken, Izuku acknowledged. Don't give me that calm crap, Bakugo growled. He kicked a desk aside. You're still planning on UA, aren't you? It's the only logical destination for hero studies, Izuku said calmly. You're quirkless. Bakugo shouted, small explosions popping in his palms. You can't do the math on that, nerd. 0 equals 0. You're gonna die in the exam. I might, Izuku admitted. He swung his backpack over his shoulder. But the probability of failure is 100% if I don't try. If I try, the probability becomes non-zero. I prefer the non-zero integer. He walked past Bakugo. For a second, it looked like Bakugo would attack. His shoulder twitched, the tell Izuku had memorized. Izuku's weight shifted to his back leg, ready to pivot, but Bakugo didn't strike. He just glared, his teeth grinding. Get out of my face. Just watching you pisses me off. Izuku left. He took the long way home, avoiding the main roads, seeking the quiet of the underpasses to think. The tunnel was cool and dark. Condensation dripped from the ceiling. Drip. 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 Izuku walked in the center of the tunnel, his senses alert. Ectoplasm's training had made him paranoid in the best way possible. Check corners. Listen for echoes. Watch the shadows. He heard the sound before he saw it. A wet, slurping noise. Like mud sliding over concrete. Behind, Izuku spun around. From the sewer grate, a massive, undulating mass of dark green fluid erupted. It formed eyes. A mouth. Teeth made of sludge. A medium-sized invisibility cloak. The villain hissed. Villain type, fluid/mutant. Composition, viscous liquid. Weakness, containment or evaporation. Physical attacks, ineffective. The analysis flashed through Izuku's mind in a nanosecond. The villain lunged. Run! Izuku's brain screamed. But his body did something else. It calculated distance 4 meters. Speed of approach high. Space confined. Izuku dropped his bag. He reached for the strap, swinging it like a flail, a move he practiced to create distance. The bag hit the sludge. Splat. It sank in. The villain didn't even flinch. Useless. The villain laughed. The sludge wrapped around Izuku. It was cold. Suffocating. It rushed into his nose, his mouth. It tasted like oil and sewage. Can't breathe. Airway compromised. Oxygen levels dropping. Izuku clawed at the sludge. His fingers found no purchase. It was like trying to grab water. Think. Think. Pain is data. The data says I am drowning. Don't struggle, kid. It'll only hurt for a minute. Thanks for the ride. Izuku's vision blurred. Black spots danced in his eyes. Is this it? After 10 months of hell? After dragging refrigerators and doing algebra in the sand? I die in a sewer? No. The equation isn't balanced yet. Izuku stopped clawing wildly. He remembered Ectoplasm's lesson on the beach with the washing machine. If you cannot overcome the force, find the fulcrum. Where was the fulcrum in a fluid? The eyes. Izuku forced his eyes open, stinging against the sludge. He saw the villain's giant, bulging eyeball floating in the muck inches from his face. He stiffened his fingers. Spear hand. He thrust his hand into the sludge, aiming not for the surface, but deep, toward the eye. Gah! The villain flinched. The grip loosened for a fraction of a second. It was enough for a gasp of air. Just a sip, but before Izuku could capitalize, the manhole cover above them exploded. Fear not, kid! A booming voice. A gust of wind that smelled of justice and American cologne. For I am here. All Might stood at the tunnel entrance. He was a mountain of muscle, a technicolor dream in a gray world. The villain shrieked. All Might? Texas. Smash! The punch didn't hit the villain. It hit the air. The wind pressure alone was like a hurricane. The sludge was blown apart, splattered against the tunnel walls like abstract art. Izuku was thrown back. He hit the concrete, rolled, and stopped. He gasped, coughing up sludge. He wiped his eyes. All Might was there. He was bottling the villain up in empty soda bottles with blinding speed. Are you alright, young man? Apologies for getting you caught up in my justice ing. Izuku stared. The symbol of peace. In the flesh. Fanbism threatened to override logic. He wanted an autograph. He wanted a selfie. But then he looked at the sludge in the bottles. He looked at his own trembling hands. I couldn't escape. Even with the training. I needed saving. Well, I must be off. Evil doesn't rest, and neither do I. All Might flexed, preparing to jump. Wait. Izuku scrambled up. All Might, wait. No time. Stay out of trouble. All Might leaped. The shockwave rattled Izuku's teeth. Without thinking, abandoning all logic, all calculations of mass and drag, Izuku grabbed All Might's leg. Variable 2, the rooftop and the constant. The rooftop wind was cold. All Might deflated. It wasn't a metaphor. He literally hissed out steam and shrank into a skeletal, gaunt figure that looked shockingly like the homeless men who sometimes slept near Dagoba Beach. Izuku stood frozen. A imposter? No, the skeleton man sighed, wiping blood from his mouth. Just the truth, All Might explained. The injury. The respiratory system failure. The time limit. It was a barrage of data. Izuku absorbed it, his mind automatically categorizing it. Respiratory damage implies reduced stamina. Missing stomach implies nutritional deficits. 3 hours a day implies he is operating at 12.5% capacity. Now you know, All Might said, sitting on the railing. The symbol of peace is just a guy holding in his gut. He looked at Izuku. The boy wasn't screaming. He wasn't crying. He was thinking. His eyes were darting back and forth, calculating. Kid, the injury, Izuku muttered. It's on your left side. That explains why your Texas smash had a slight rotational lag. You were compensating for the scar tissue restricting your oblique muscles. All Might blinked. Sure. Sharp eye. Izuku looked up. All Might, can I ask you something? The question I chased you for? All Might sighed. Go ahead. I don't have a quirk. All Might's face softened into a look of pity. He knew what was coming. I have a teacher, Izuku said, surprising All Might. A pro-hero. He's been training me for 10 months. He says that heroism is just geometry. That if I calculate the variables, I can survive. Izuku clenched his fists. But just now, in the tunnel, I couldn't get out. I used the techniques. I aimed for the eye. I managed my panic. But I still would have died if you hadn't shown up. He looked at the skeletal hero, his eyes burning with a desperate need for validation. Ectoplasm Sensei says the odds are non-zero. But are they? Can someone like me really be a hero? Or am I just solving an equation that has no answer? All Might looked away. He looked at his hand, the hand that held one for all, the power that crushed mountains. He thought about the villains he fought. Toxic Chainsaw. All for one. Beings that defied logic. Beings that broke geometry. This teacher of yours, All Might said softly. He sounds like a good man. A pragmatist. He is. But... All Might stood up. Pragmatism has limits. Pros are always risking their lives. We see things that nightmares are made of. And in those moments, when the math fails, when the strategy breaks, you need power. You need a hammer to break the wall. All Might lifted his shirt, revealing the horrific, spiderweb scar on his side. I have the greatest power in the world, and this happened to me. If I had been weaker, I would be dead. And the people I saved would be dead. He looked Izuku in the eye. It's good to dream, young man. But you also have to be realistic. If you want to save people, become a police officer. They get little credit, but they do good work. They carry guns. They have backup. They have safer variables. He turned to the door. No. I don't think you can be a hero without a quirk. Not the kind you want to be. The risk, it's just too high. All Might opened the door and walked away. Izuku stood alone on the roof. The wind howled. No. He heard the word again. The first time, from the doctor, it broke him. The second time, from Ectoplasm, it came with an asterisk. No, unless. The third time, from All Might, it was final. Izuku walked to the railing. He looked down at the city. It was a grid. Streets, buildings, cars. A complex system of moving parts. He's right, Izuku whispered. Statistically, he's right. He gripped the railing until his knuckles turned white. But he didn't see me hit the eye. Izuku closed his eyes. He replayed the tunnel incident. If I had a tool, if I had a flashbang, if I had leverage. Boom! An explosion echoed in the distance. Izuku's eyes snapped open. A plume of black smoke was rising from the shopping district. Variable detected. His feet moved before his brain gave permission. He didn't run to watch. He ran to calculate. Variable 3, the fire and the failure. The scene was a chaotic mess of thermodynamics and crowd psychology. Fire ravaged the alleyway. The heat was palpable from a block away. Police lines were established, but they were flimsy. The crowd pushed against the yellow tape, phones raised, hungry for spectacle. Izuku slipped through the crowd. He was small. He was unobtrusive. He found a spot near a telephone pole and scanned the scene. Villain, the sludge guy. How did he escape? All Might, the bottle. It must have fallen when I grabbed him. My fault. My variable. Heroes present. Death arms strength type. Useless against fluids. He's just punching the sludge and getting stuck. Kamui Woods wood type. Fire weakness. He's focused on rescue, keeping civilians back. Correct tactical choice. Empty lady, gigantification. The alley is too narrow, approximate 4 meters wide. If she grows, she causes structural collapse. Useless. Izuku's eyes darted frantically. The heroes are stagnant. They are waiting for a specialist. They are waiting for a variable that isn't there. Then he saw the hostage. Buried in the muck, only a face was visible. Blonde hair. Red eyes wide with a terror that looked alien on that face. Kaken. Bakugo wasn't fighting back effectively. His explosions were erratic, creating smoke that obscured vision but didn't dislodge the fluid. If anything, The heat was making the sludge expand. He's suffocating. Oxygen deprivation. Brain damage imminent in 45 seconds. The pros were shouting. Hold on, kid! Someone with a quirk is coming. Someone. Anyone. Not me. Izuku stood frozen. All Might's words echoed in his head. Be realistic. Ectoplasm's words echoed louder. The shortest distance to a target is rarely a straight line. And then, Bakugo's eyes met Izuku's. They didn't say I'll kill you. They didn't say get lost. They screamed, silent and raw, help me. The equation shifted. Risk death. Reward Kaken lives. Probability of success. Low. Probability of an action resulting in death. 100%. Damn the math, Izuku hissed. He ducked under the police tape. Hey! Kid! Get back! Death Arm shouted. Izuku didn't hear him. He was in the zone. The ectoplasm zone. He didn't scream. He didn't flail. He sprinted. Terrain analysis, pavement. Broken glass. Debris from the explosion. He kept his center of gravity low. He ran in a zigzag pattern, vector A, vector B, making himself a harder target for the sludge tendrils. The villain saw him. You again? I'll kill you this time. A massive whip of sludge lashed out, incoming at 12 o'clock. Speed fast. Izuku didn't stop. He slid. Like a baseball player stealing home, he dropped to his hip, sliding across the pavement under the sludge whip. The heat scorched his forehead. He was inside the guard. Weapon check backpack. Contents, textbooks heavy, notebook dense. He swung the backpack. Not a panic throw. A calculated trajectory. He aimed for the eye again. The villain expected it this time. He shifted the eye. Feint. Izuku didn't let go of the bag. He used the momentum of the swing to spin his body, torque, and slammed the heavy bag into the villain's mouth area, where the sludge was bubbling around Bakugo's face. Thwack. The impact didn't hurt the villain, but it disrupted the surface tension. The sludge rippled. Let him go! Izuku didn't scream it like a plea. He barked it like a command. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out his water bottle, half full. Viscosity manipulation. He splashed the water onto the sludge around Bakugo's mouth. Water? The villain laughed. Pathetic, but the water mixed with the sludge. It thinned it. Just a fraction. Just enough to make it slippery. Izuku jammed his hands into the thinned section. He found the collar of Bakugo's uniform. Deku? Bakugo choked out. What the hell? Shut up and breathe. Izuku gritted his teeth. He planted his feet, horse stance, and pulled. He used his legs. The legs that had carried refrigerators. The legs that had run miles in the sand. Pull. Leverage. Ground force reaction. Get off. The villain roared. He reformed his tendrils. He raised a massive glob of sludge high in the air, hardening it into a hammer. Izuku saw the shadow. Pattern recognition, overhead strike. Fatal. He couldn't dodge. If he dodged, he let go of Bakugo. If he let go, Bakugo died. Variable check none. Options 0. Izuku didn't let go. He stared at the descending hammer. He calculated the angle of impact. He braced his shoulder to shield Bakugo's face. If I take the hit on the scapula, I might survive with a shattered shoulder. Pain is data, Detroit. The voice came from everywhere. Izuku felt a hand grab the back of his uniform. A hand the size of a dinner plate. Smash! The world went white. Variable 4, the pressure differential. The wind didn't just blow, it deleted the fire. The upward pressure of the punch created a vacuum. The clouds above swirled, condensed, and shattered. Rain began to fall. Black rain, mixed with ash and soot. Izuku sat on the pavement, blinking. The sludge villain was gone, scattered into droplets across 3 city blocks. Bakugo was sitting next to him, coughing violently. All Might stood before them. He wasn't smiling. He was steaming, his body pushed past its limit, but he held the pose. The victory pose. The crowd went silent. Then they erupted. It's rain! He changed the weather. All Might! All Might! Izuku looked at All Might. He saw the tremble in the hero's leg. He's at -5% capacity. He forced that. Then the pros descended. You idiot! Death Arms grabbed Izuku by the shoulder and hauled him up. The hero was furious. You have a death wish, kid? You ran into a hostage situation. You interfere with hero work. Kamui Woods was nodding. You could have gotten yourself killed and the hostage too. That was reckless and stupid. On the other side, the pros were praising Bakugo. Kid, that quirk is amazing. You held out so long. You're a natural. The injustice of it burned. Bakugo, who had caused the explosions, was a hero. Izuku, who had created the opening, was a nuisance. Izuku looked at Death Arms. He looked at the finger poking his chest. Usually, he would bow. He would apologize. He would shrink. But Ectoplasm wasn't here to defend him. And if Ectoplasm wasn't here, Izuku had to defend the variables himself. I didn't interfere, Izuku said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through Death Arms shouting. What did you say? Death Arms growled. Izuku looked up. His eyes were cold, analytical. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a crystalline clarity. I acted in accordance with the Good Samaritan Laws, Section 4, Paragraph 2 regarding imminent peril to life, Izuku recited. He had read the law books. Ectoplasm insisted on legal literacy. The heroes on scene were stationary for over 3 minutes. The victim showed signs of cyanosis, blue lips, lack of oxygen. Brain death begins after 4 minutes of anoxia. Izuku pointed at the spot where the villain had been. You lacked the correct quirk matchups. You were waiting. While you waited, the variable, the victim, was dying. I did not attack the villain with lethal force. I applied a distraction and attempted to clear the airway. I created a window of opportunity. He took a breath. If I hadn't acted, would you have continued to wait until he stopped breathing? Silence. Death Arms looked stunned. A middle schooler was lecturing him on triage protocols? You quirkless brat. Death Arms sputtered. That doesn't change the fact that you were defenseless. I wasn't defenseless, Izuku said, adjusting his backpack strap. I had a plan. And unlike you, I moved. He bowed stiffly, a polite, mechanical gesture. I apologize for the disturbance. I will be leaving now. He turned and walked away. The police didn't stop him. The heroes stared, mouths agape. All Might watched him go. He watched the slump of the boy's shoulders, the way he limped slightly on his right leg. He's right, All Might thought, feeling a heavy stone settle in his non-existent stomach. We were waiting. He moved. Variable 5, the remainder. The sun was setting, painting the wet streets in gold and blood orange. Izuku walked home. His energy was gone. The crash was coming. His knees shook with every step. I yelled at a pro hero. I almost died. I ruined everything. He felt like crying. But Ectoplasm's voice was there. Tears are inefficient. Deku! Izuku stopped. He didn't turn. He knew the voice. Katsuki Bakugo ran up behind him. He was panting, his clothes damp from the rain. He stopped 5 meters away. The distance of a duel. I didn't ask for your help. Bakugo yelled. His voice cracked. And you didn't save me. I was fine. I would have gotten free on my own. You're a quirkless failure who played hero. Don't look down on me. I don't owe you anything. Bakugo turned and stomped away. Izuku watched him go. Analysis. Kaken's ego is his armor. By saving him, or trying to, I cracked the armor. His reaction is defensive aggression to repair the structural integrity of his pride. I know, Kaken, Izuku whispered. You don't know me. That's not how the math works. He started walking again. I am here. Izuku jumped, nearly tripping over his own feet. Gah! All Might slid out from an alleyway in a blur of motion. He landed in his muscle form, then immediately poofed back into his skeleton form, coughing up a spray of blood. All Might? Izuku shrieked. You shouldn't be using your quirk. You're over the limit. I am, All Might wheezed, wiping his mouth. But I had to catch you. You're fast, kid. Good cardio. Ectoplasm sensei makes me run in sand, Izuku mumbled. All Might straightened up. He looked at the boy. The boy who had lectured Death Arms. The boy who had thrown a backpack like a tactical grenade. I have a correction to make, All Might said. A correction? On the roof. I told you that you couldn't be a hero. I told you to be realistic. All Might took a step forward. I was judging you based on the variable of power. I thought that because you lacked power, you lacked the capacity to save. He placed a hand on his chest. But today, in that crowd of people, amidst all those pro-heroes with their flashy quirks, only one person moved. Only one person saw the danger and ran toward it. Izuku's eyes widened. They began to water. Inefficient. Top heroes have stories about their school days, All Might said gently. And most of them agree on one thing: my body moved on its own. Izuku trembled. You didn't just move, young man. You thought. You acted. You fought. All Might smiled. It wasn't the commercial smile. It was real. You were right. And I was wrong. The equation isn't finished yet. He pointed a finger at Izuku. You can be a hero. The dam broke. The efficiency of tear retention failed. Izuku dropped to his knees, clutching his chest, and sobbed into the pavement. It wasn't just the words. It was the confirmation. The data matched the hypothesis. I am not zero. All Might waited. He let the boy cry. However, All Might said loudly, cutting through the sobbing. Izuku looked up, snot running down his nose. Huh! I have a proposal! A variable to add to your training. You said you have a teacher, yes? Ectoplasm? Why, yes. Good. He's building your body. He's building your mind. But All Might grinned, and for a second, the shadow of the symbol of peace loomed large. I can give you the hammer. I can give you the power to break the walls that math cannot solve. Power? Izuku asked. My quirk, All Might whispered conspiratorially. I can pass it on to you. Izuku froze. His brain rebooted. Transferable quirk? Genetic impossibility. Historical precedent 0. Unless, stockpiling mutation? Energy transfer? Wait, Izuku said, wiping his face. You want to give me your quirk? Yes. Izuku stood up. He looked at All Might. Then he looked at his own hands. If I take it, does the math change? It changes everything, All Might said. It makes you the greatest variable of all. Izuku thought about ectoplasm. He thought about the sand. He thought about the unless. Okay, Izuku said. But I have to ask my sensei first. All Might face faulted, coughing blood again. You want to ask permission? He's my teacher. Izuku said defensively. It would be rude not to. And he needs to calculate the impact of the quirk on my training schedule. All Might stared at the boy. Then he threw his head back and laughed. A dry, wheezing laugh. Rational. Logical. I like it. Very well, young Midoriya. Let us go meet your ectoplasm. I have a feeling this is going to be an interesting parent-teacher conference.